June 26, 1943, over France, 20,000 feet. Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson sat in the cockpit of his P-47 Thunderbolt. Around him, 47 other American fighters. Below, enemy territory. The mission, escort bombers home. Then the ambush came. 16 German FW-190 fighters, diving from above. Before Johnson could react, his aircraft shuddered. 20-millimeter cannon shells tearing through metal. The cockpit exploded around him. Glass shattered. Instruments destroyed. Hydraulic fluid spraying. Johnson felt something hit his face. A bullet. Nicked his nose. Destroyed his oxygen mask. The engine caught fire. Flames spreading toward the cockpit. The P-47 began spinning. Out of control. Falling. Johnson tried to bail out. Pulled the canopy release. It jammed. Only opened 6 inches. Not enough. He was trapped. In a burning aircraft. Spinning toward Earth. He kicked the rudder. Pulled back on the stick. The spin stopped. The wings leveled. And somehow, impossibly, the fire went out. But the nightmare wasn't over. A blue and yellow FW-190 appeared behind him. Close. Very close. German fighter. The pilot saw Johnson was helpless. No way to fight back. Blind from oil covering the windshield. Instruments dead. The German opened fire. Machine guns hammering. Bullets punching through the fuselage. Hundreds of rounds. The P-47 shook. Metal screaming. Johnson waited to die. The shooting stopped. The German pulled alongside. Looked at Johnson's destroyed aircraft. Shook his head in disbelief. Then attacked again. And again. Emptying every round he had. When Johnson finally landed, ground crew reports described the damage. 21 20-millimeter cannon shells. They stopped counting bullet holes at 200, on just one side of the aircraft. This is the report on Robert S. Johnson, on one of the most heavily damaged fighters ever brought home, on the P-47 Thunderbolt that refused to die, on the mission that proved what ruggedness really means. This isn't a legend. It's a damage report with a pilot still inside. 200 bullets, 21 cannon shells, fire in the cockpit, canopy jammed shut, and he flew home anyway. June 26, 1943. One P-47 Thunderbolt took 21 cannon shells and over 200 bullets. The canopy jammed. The pilot couldn't bail out. The fire went out on its own. He flew home anyway. Subscribe for stories where the numbers don't lie. Lawton, Oklahoma. Born February 21, 1920. Lawton, Oklahoma. Small town. Open skies. Johnson's father worked for the railroad. His mother was a teacher. Normal childhood. Normal family. Except for one thing. Summer 1928. Johnson was 8 years old. His father took him to an air show at Post Field. The Army Air Corps 3 Musketeers performed. 3 pursuit biplanes, aerobatics, barrel rolls, loops, dives. Johnson watched the aircraft, the way they moved, the sound of engines, the freedom of flight. Something changed in him that day. He started building model airplanes, flying them across nearby fields, saved money for flying lessons. By his teenage years, he'd learned to fly from a makeshift airstrip near town. When he was 12, he finally flew in a real aircraft, Ford Trimotor. Brief flight from Lawton. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. Joining the war. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Johnson was 21. He'd been working various jobs, learning about engines, staying close to aviation however he could. He joined the Army Air Forces immediately, entered pilot training. The program was demanding. Long hours, Texas sun, classroom lessons, practical flight time in Stearman PT-17 trainers. Many trainees washed out, couldn't handle the pressure, couldn't master the aircraft. Johnson excelled. Natural feel for flight, calm under pressure, balanced instinct with discipline. But here's where the story gets complicated. Johnson was classified as a bomber pilot, not a fighter pilot. Bomber pilots flew multi-engine aircraft, transported cargo, carried bombs, different skill set, different mindset. But the war needed fighter pilots, urgently. The Thunderbolt. January 1943. Johnson was assigned to the 56th Fighter Group, 61st Fighter Squadron. The aircraft, Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. The P-47 was massive for a fighter, nicknamed the Jug because its profile resembled a milk jug. 7 tons fully loaded. Huge Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine. 2,000 horsepower, 18 cylinders, 8.50 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing. Devastating firepower. The aircraft was designed for one thing: survive combat and kill the enemy. But Johnson had a problem. He was a bomber pilot. He'd never fired the guns on a P-47, never completed fighter gunnery training, wasn't officially qualified to fly fighters in combat. His commanders sent him to Llanbedr, Wales. March 10th, 1943. 2-week gunnery course. Learn to shoot. Qualify for combat. The weather didn't cooperate. British weather. Fog. Rain. No flying. The 2 weeks passed. Johnson never fired a shot. Returned to base still unqualified. They sent him to RAF Goxhill. Another attempt at gunnery training. Johnson couldn't hit the target sleeve. Day after day. Missing. Finally, on his last day, he hit it once. Failed the course. But the 56 Fighter Group needed pilots, qualified or not. The war didn't wait for training schedules. He wasn't supposed to be there. But wars don't wait for paperwork. April 18, 1943. Johnson flew his first combat mission. Fighter sweep over the Netherlands. Still rated as a bomber pilot. Still hadn't passed gunnery qualification. The mission was uneventful. No German fighters. No combat. Johnson returned safely. His commanders worried. Colonel Hubert Zemke, Captain Gerald W. Johnson. Both questioned whether Robert Johnson could perform as a fighter pilot. He was flying combat missions without basic qualifications. Johnson worried too. He knew he was behind. Knew other pilots doubted him. Knew he had to prove himself. First kill, June 13, 1943. Johnson's chance came. The 56th Fighter Group encountered a formation of FW-190s, 8 German fighters. Johnson was supposed to fly top cover, stay high, protect the formation. He didn't. He dove past Colonel Zemke, broke formation, attacked the leader of the German formation. He fired. The FW-190 went down. Confirmed kill. Johnson had violated every rule, broken formation, disobeyed orders, attacked without authorization. But he'd gotten his first victory, proved he could fight. The unqualified bomber pilot had become a fighter pilot. 13 days later, everything changed. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't pretty. It was functional. Built like a tank. Designed to take punishment and keep flying. The engine, Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp. Radial configuration, air-cooled. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows of 9. Each cylinder, massive piston pumping. Combined displacement, 2,804 cubic inches, nearly 46 liters, generating 2,000 horsepower at takeoff. The radial design was key. Unlike inline liquid-cooled engines used in P-51 Mustangs, Spitfires, German Bf-109s, radials didn't depend on coolant circulation. One hit to a coolant line in a Mustang meant engine overheating within minutes. Dead engine, dead aircraft, forced landing or bailout. Radials were different. Each cylinder operated independently, air-cooled. A radial could lose 1 cylinder, 2 cylinders, even entire rows and keep firing. Stories existed of P-47s returning with cylinders shot completely away. Engine rough, power reduced, but still running. The fuel system, self-sealing tanks. Rubber layers that closed automatically when punctured. Bullets could pierce the tanks. They did, regularly, but fuel didn't pour out. The holes sealed. The aircraft kept flying. The airframe, thick aluminum skin over robust frame members. not the lightweight construction of interceptors built for pure speed. The P-47 traded some agility for survivability. Every structural member was oversized, every joint reinforced. The cockpit, armored, steel plate behind the pilot's seat, thick enough to stop machine gun fire, thick enough to deflect smaller cannon shells. Johnson would feel those impacts later, bullets thudding into armor, each one a reminder he was still alive. The armament, 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, 4 in each wing. Total ammunition load, 3,400 rounds. Devastating firepower. German pilots learned quickly, don't give a Thunderbolt a head-on shot. 8 guns converging at 400 yards meant destruction. The weight, 17,500 pounds fully loaded. Heavy. Some fighters weighed 8,000 to 9,000 pounds. The P-47 was nearly double. That weight was structure, armor, ammunition, engine, fuel, everything needed to survive and fight. In the P-47, survival wasn't a hope, it was a design goal. And on June 26th, every one of those design choices would get tested. The philosophy, bring the pilot home. Speed and firepower were important. Survival was paramount. Republic aviation engineers designed accordingly. This wasn't theory. It was about to become a body count in aluminum. A radial can keep running even while everything around it is failing. German ace Heinrich Bahr, who flew against P-47s repeatedly, said it could absorb an astounding amount of lead and had to be handled very carefully. Coming from the enemy, that was high praise. Bahr had over 200 victories. He knew aircraft. He knew the P-47 was different. Zemke's Wolfpack, named for Colonel Hubert Zemke, aggressive, disciplined, one of the most effective fighter groups in the European theater. The pilots, Francis Gabby Gabreski, eventual top ace in Europe with 28 kills. Robert Johnson, 27 kills. Gerald Johnson, Bob's flight leader. Bud Mahurin, Joe Powers, who'd later die in Korea. All became aces. All flew P-47s. All trusted the Thunderbolt completely. The group deployed to England in January 1943, based at Halesworth in Suffolk, later RAF King's Cliff, operating from primitive forward bases when needed. Their job? Escort B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator bombers deep into Germany. The bombers struck factories, rail yards, oil refineries, strategic targets, heavily defended. German fighters intercepted. FW-190s and BF-109s. Fast, agile, heavily armed, flown by experienced pilots. Many were aces themselves with dozens of kills, some with over 100 victories on the Eastern Front, now transferred west. The missions were brutal. 6-hour flights, constant vigilance, oxygen masks, freezing temperatures at altitude. Any moment could bring an attack, from above, from behind, from the sun, from below. German tactics evolved. They'd wait until the American fighters reached their fuel limits, then attack, force the fighters to drop tanks, burn fuel dogfighting, leave the bombers unprotected. Pilots lived with statistics. Average life expectancy for a fighter pilot, measured in missions. Every mission increased the odds against survival. Eventually, everyone's number came up. But the P-47 gave pilots a better chance. It could take hits that would destroy other fighters. It could dive away when necessary. Few aircraft could follow a Thunderbolt in a full-power dive. It could fight its way home. By late June, Johnson had several missions under his belt, learning the reality of combat, very different from training, the chaos, the speed, the fear. He was still the unqualified bomber pilot, still hadn't officially passed gunnery training, but he had one confirmed kill now. June 13th, that FW-190 that went down, proof he could fight. His squadron mates were beginning to accept him. Zemke's initial doubts were fading. Johnson was performing, making good decisions, following orders, mostly, learning fast. June 26th would test everything he'd learned, and everything the P-47 was built for. June 26, 1943. Morning briefing. Mission: escort B-17 bombers returning from Villacoublay Aerodrome near Paris. The bombers had struck the airfield. Now they needed protection getting home. 48 P-47 Thunderbolts would provide escort. Johnson was assigned to the formation. Standard escort duty. Routine mission. They took off from RAF Manston in eastern England, climbed to altitude, headed toward France, crossed the English Channel. The rendezvous. The Thunderbolts met the bomber formation over France. The B-17s were damaged, some trailing smoke. They'd taken hits over the target. Anti-aircraft fire, fighter attacks. They needed to reach England. The P-47 spread out, covering the bombers from all angles, scanning the sky, watching for German fighters. Near Forges-les-Eaux, northern France, altitude 20,000 feet. Then they came, 16 FW-190s, diving from above, out of the sun, classic ambush position. The Germans had altitude advantage, speed advantage, surprise advantage. The formation scattered, every pilot for himself. Dogfight rules. Don't get fixated on one target. Keep your head moving. Check 6 o'clock. Stay fast. Stay aggressive. The hit. Johnson saw the tracers too late. 20mm cannon fire, heavy caliber, explosive rounds. A 20mm hit doesn't punch a hole. It tears a room apart. The shells hit his aircraft. Multiple impacts. Cockpit area. The canopy shattered. Instruments exploded. Hydraulic lines ruptured. Seconds later, fluid sprayed everywhere. Oil. Hydraulic fluid. Blinding. Johnson couldn't see. Something hit his face. Sharp. Fast. A bullet. Grazed his nose. Destroyed his oxygen mask. Blood running. He could taste it. Another hit his right leg, just under the skin. The bullet split in half on impact. Both pieces lodged in muscle. He'd keep those fragments for the rest of his life. Pain. Immediate. Multiple points. But adrenaline masked it. Survival instinct took over. The engine. Smoke. Then fire. Flames spreading from the cowling toward the cockpit. Within seconds, the P-47 began spinning. Johnson had lost control. Stick unresponsive. Rudder ineffective. Gyroscopic forces from the spinning propeller and engine fighting him. The aircraft fell. Spinning. Flames growing. Johnson was seconds from dying. The bailout attempt. Standard procedure. Bail out of a damaged aircraft. Pull the canopy release. Unstrap. Kick away. Pull the ripcord. Parachute deploys. Survive. Johnson reached for the canopy jettison mechanism. Pulled. The canopy moved. Slightly. 6 inches. Then jammed. Damaged by cannon fire. Twisted frame. Bent metal. It wouldn't open further. 6 inches. Not enough. At that speed, even a few inches of slipstream could rip a man apart. Johnson couldn't fit through. Couldn't bail out. He was trapped in a burning, spinning fighter aircraft at 20,000 feet. He had seconds. The recovery. Johnson kicked left rudder. Hard. All the pressure he could apply. The spin was right-handed. Counter it with left rudder. He pulled back on the stick, fighting the spin, fighting the gyroscopic forces, using every bit of strength. The wings began to level. Slowly. The spin slowed. Stopped. The nose came up. The aircraft transitioned from spin to controlled flight, and the fire went out. Nobody knew exactly why. The spin may have starved it of airflow or disrupted the fuel feed. Maybe the change in G-forces. Maybe something else. Johnson didn't care. The flames disappeared. He was alive. Barely. Blinded by hydraulic fluid and oil. No instruments. No oxygen. Damaged aircraft. Over enemy territory. But alive. He turned toward the English Channel. Toward home. 200 miles of enemy airspace. Then safety. He didn't make it 50 miles before the FW-190 found him. A single FW-190. Blue and yellow markings. Close. Very close. The pilot was often attributed to Oberstleutnant Egon Mayer, commander of 3/JG2, German ace, experienced, skilled, ruthless, though this identification remains unverified. He saw the damaged P-47, saw it was helpless, the perfect kill, easy target. He positioned behind Johnson, close range, maybe 50 feet, point blank. The first attack. The German pilot opened fire. Machine guns, 7.92 millimeters caliber, 2 guns, high rate of fire. The bullets hammered the Thunderbolt, hundreds of rounds in seconds, punching through aluminum skin, through control surfaces, through everything. Johnson felt the impacts, heard them, the fuselage shuddering, metal tearing, the sound of destruction. He couldn't fight back. His guns were fine. He just didn't have a windshield anymore. Oil and hydraulic fluid covered everything. Blur. He was flying blind. All Johnson could do was maneuver. Hit the rudder. Left. Right. Throw off the German's aim slightly. Make him work for the kill. The FW-190 overshot. Pulled up. Came around for another pass. The second attack. The German pulled alongside Johnson's wing, close enough to see into the cockpit. He looked at the damage, looked at Johnson, shook his head. The expression was clear. "How are you still flying?" Then he dropped back, lined up again, fired. More machine gun fire, more impacts. The P-47 absorbed everything. Bullets striking armor plate behind Johnson's seat, thudding into the engine cowling, ripping through wings. Johnson jolted with each impact, felt the aircraft dying around him. But it kept flying. The engine kept running. The controls still responded. The German came alongside again, looked again. Disbelief. The third attack. This time the German stayed behind longer, methodical, spraying fire from wingtip to wingtip, using rudder to walk his fire across the entire aircraft, ensuring every inch was hit, every structure compromised, every system damaged. Hundreds of rounds poured into the helpless Thunderbolt. A full burst, then another, until the guns fell silent. Johnson kept maneuvering, small movements, all he could manage. The aircraft was barely responding now. Flight controls damaged, hydraulics failing, flying on mechanical cables and willpower. Over the channel. Johnson had made it to the English Channel. England was close. Safety was minutes away. By the time the coastline appeared, he'd been under fire for minutes. The German attacked again. Over the water. Final chance to kill the American. More fire. More impacts. The Thunderbolt kept flying. Then silence. The German's guns stopped. Out of ammunition. Every round expended into one target. He pulled alongside one final time. Looked at Johnson. Looked at the destroyed aircraft that was somehow still flying. He rocked his wings. Salute. Respect. Acknowledgement of the impossible. Then he turned, headed back toward France, left Johnson alone. Johnson was bleeding, injured, in shock, flying a destroyed aircraft. But he was going to make it. The German pilot just emptied every round he had. The P-47 is still flying. Johnson is blind, injured, and about to attempt a landing with no hydraulics. Stay with me. The impossible part is the landing. Johnson contacted Mayday Control by radio. Somehow the radio still worked. "This is Thunderbolt." His voice shook. Adrenaline crash hitting. "Returning damaged. Request landing instructions." Mayday Control responded. Calm. Professional. "Can you climb?" Johnson checked his controls. The stick responded. Barely. "Affirmative. Climbing." The battered P-47 climbed. Against all logic. Against all aerodynamics. A destroyed aircraft performing normally. Mayday Control vectored him to RAF Manston, his home base, familiar runway, ground crew who knew him. The approach. Johnson had one major concern: landing gear. The P-47 used hydraulic systems for gear operation. Hydraulic pressure was gone. Lines were cut. Fluid everywhere. If the gear didn't deploy, he'd have to belly land. On a destroyed aircraft, with damaged controls, likely fatal. He reached the field, lined up on final approach, dropped gear lever, and waited. The mechanical backup system kicked in. Not hydraulics, gravity. The simplest backup in aviation. Let it fall. Gravity and spring pressure. The main gear doors opened. The wheels dropped, locked into position. Green lights, gear down and locked. Johnson couldn't believe it. After everything, the gear worked. He flew the approach. Couldn't see well through oil-covered windshield. Used peripheral vision, memory of the runway, instinct. The wheels touched. The P-47 settled onto the runway, rolled, slowed, stopped. Johnson tried to open the canopy. It was still jammed. Ground crew had to pry it open. They pulled him out, carefully. He could barely stand. The damage assessment. Johnson walked around his aircraft, what was left of it. The ground crew followed, staring. He started counting bullet holes. 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. He stopped at 200, on just one side of the aircraft. He hadn't even walked all the way around. Ground crew later reported the full damage assessment. 21 20mm cannon shell impacts, large holes, explosive damage, structural failures, more than 200 machine gun bullet holes, 7.92mm caliber, entry and exit holes throughout the fuselage, cockpit destroyed, instruments shattered, canopy damaged, hydraulic systems badly damaged, control surfaces riddled, engine cowling perforated, wings compromised. The aircraft was a total write-off, scrap metal, beyond repair, but it had flown home, brought its pilot back alive. Johnson's injuries: nose, bullet graze, minor bleeding. Right leg, bullet lodged under skin, split in half, 2 fragments, removed later. Johnson kept them. Face, hands, legs, burns from fire and hydraulic fluid, minor. Shrapnel wounds, various, superficial. Overall assessment: he was awarded the Purple Heart. Light injuries considering the circumstances. Johnson went to the hospital. Treatment, observation, rest. 5 days later, he was back in the cockpit. The injuries weren't the point. The lesson was, the jug can take it. July 1st, 1943, 5 days after the mission. Johnson returned to flight status. New aircraft, fittingly named Lucky. He wasn't the same pilot who'd flown on June 26th. Combat had changed him. Near death had changed him. He'd learned lessons written in bullet holes and cannon shells. The lessons: stay aware. Never get fixated on one target. The threat you don't see is the one that kills you. Trust the aircraft. The P-47 had brought him home when any other fighter would have disintegrated. It could take punishment. It could survive. Fight smart. Aggression was important, but tactics mattered more. Use the P-47's strengths: speed in dives, ruggedness, firepower. Johnson applied these lessons. His combat effectiveness increased. His kill count grew. The Rickenbacker chase. By early 1944, Johnson was approaching a significant milestone: 26 aerial victories, the number that mattered. Eddie Rickenbacker, World War I ace, 26 confirmed kills, America's top ace for 25 years. Several World War II pilots were closing in on the record: Johnson, Gabby Gabreski, others. The press followed closely. Who would be first? Johnson extended his combat tour. Standard tour, 200 hours. He requested and received a 25-hour extension. More missions, more chances. March 15, 1944. Promoted to captain. May 8, 1944. Johnson's final mission of his extended tour. He scored 2 kills, BF-109 and FW-190. Total, 27 victories. Robert S. Johnson became the first American fighter pilot in the European theater to surpass Rickenbacker's World War I record. He'd done it all in the P-47 Thunderbolt, the aircraft that saved his life, the aircraft he trusted completely. Return home, June 6, 1944, D-Day. While Allied forces landed at Normandy, Johnson flew home to the United States. Total combat missions, 91. Total victories, 27. Later briefly credited with 28, then reduced back to 27 due to administrative error involving another pilot named Ralph A. Johnson with a nearly identical service number. Johnson left the active service but remained in the reserves. He went to work for Republic Aviation, the company that built the P-47. His first assignment? Redesign the P-47 cockpit. Make it more user-friendly. Cluster instruments for better readability, based on combat experience. Based on what he'd learned flying and fighting. 18 years with Republic, then insurance business, quiet life, normal life. The legacy. Johnson published his autobiography, Thunderbolt. The book detailed his combat experiences, often cited as a classic of aviation literature. Inducted into the Oklahoma Aviation and Space Hall of Fame, December 27, 1998, Robert Samuel Johnson died, age 78, buried with military honors. One of the most extreme documented damage cases ever brought home, the pilot who proved what the P-47 could survive, the pilot who flew home when survival was impossible. June 26, 1943, one mission, one pilot, one aircraft, 21 20mm cannon shells, more than 200 machine gun bullets, fire in the cockpit, canopy jammed, no way to bail out, blinded by oil, instruments destroyed, German ace emptied every round he had, point-blank range, continuous fire. The P-47 Thunderbolt absorbed it all, kept flying, brought its pilot home. Mechanics declared it a total write-off, but Robert Johnson was alive. 5 days later, he was flying again. New aircraft, same determination. 27 victories by war's end. First American pilot in the European theater to surpass Rickenbacker's World War I record. All in P-47 Thunderbolts. The mission on June 26th proved something the engineering specifications couldn't capture. The P-47 wasn't just rugged by design, it was survival incarnate, built to bring pilots home, no matter what. Johnson kept the bullet fragments from his leg, physical reminder, metal that almost killed him, proof of how close he'd come. He redesigned the P-47 cockpit after the war, made it better for the pilots who'd follow, passed on the lessons written in bullet holes and cannon shells. 200 bullets, 21 cannon shells, one pilot, one aircraft that refused to die. Mechanism was radial engine reliability and armored airframe construction. Numbers were verified by ground crew counting damage. Cost was one destroyed aircraft and minor pilot injuries. Result was proof that ruggedness isn't just specification, it's survival. Conclusion: survivability is measurable. On June 26th, it was counted in holes. The German ace saluted before leaving. Recognition of the impossible. The P-47 that wouldn't fall. The pilot who wouldn't quit. Robert Johnson flew home anyway. The German pilot emptied his guns and saluted before leaving. He knew what he'd just witnessed, an aircraft that refused to die. Johnson redesigned the P-47 cockpit after the war based on what he learned that day. If stories like this, where engineering saved lives, matter to you, subscribe.